the People's Bank of China has been understating its gold reserves by a factor of 4 or 5. In other words, it has 4 or 5 times as much gold as it says it does. It probably has more gold than the United States does. But, the Chinese motto is we must not shine too brightly. If it said we've got more gold than you, that would be a declaration of financial war. It would cause all sorts of upheaval in the financial markets. But it is accumulating vast amounts of gold. And this rate of accumulation accelerated in the months after America confiscated all Russian US dollar assets after it invaded Ukraine. All the countries along the Silk Road, suddenly this began a process of de-dollarization. In other words, they began accumulating gold.
Let's just talk about gold, though.
Sure.
Immortal, universally, historically, it's always been a unit of wealth, hasn't it, gold? It's never been anything else, effectively.
Yeah, its main purpose has always been to store wealth and to display it. And it's the first metal that human beings ever used. We found little gold nuggets in riverbeds when we were hunter-gathering Stone Age people, long before we were using copper or other metals for tools. And we used it to, we wore it as jewellery, we gave it out as reward.
How did we work out that it was a symbol of wealth, though? Is it just because it was shiny and looked good that it became so?
I'll give you, I'm holding up a coin here, and I'll give you, this is a Justinian solidus, which was minted in 600 AD, so it's 1,500 years old, give or take, almost. And you can still see it's nice and shiny. Gold never loses its shine. And it's actually older than the Earth itself, and it was shining long before the Earth was formed. So
and is that why it's sort of forever been a symbol of wealth?
It's beautiful. It's wealth, and
it's shiny.
I think so. You just look at it and you're compelled by it. And I'll give you a little. This is a gold sovereign that I'm holding up here, and I'll give you here. This is the old pound coin.
Yes.
And it would take. That's a Victorian gold sovereign, minted in 1880 or something, and it now takes £650 coins to buy the old pound coin.
Yeah.
That's how much money's been debased by.
Gold is worth more now. I don't know what the appropriate way to phrase this is, but gold's worth now is higher than it has been in previous generations, right? It's kind of worth, you get more bang for your buck now.
Well, yes and no. So the gold price is $3,300 an ounce, which is, the most expensive it's ever been in US dollar terms. But actually, gold is the constant, and gold never changes. And so what has actually happened is that the pound and the dollar buys you less than ever before. But because of the way the whole thing has been skewed by things like the Financial Times and the way economics is presented, the decline in the purchasing power of money has been normalised. It's something that just we take as normal. But if you look at consumer prices in the 19th century, when that was a pound coin, over the course of the 19th century, they more than halved.
Okay.
And that allowed for the growth of the middle class, because the salaried, after they'd covered food, clothing and shelter, their money, the purchasing power of their money lasted. It was preserved, so they could save and invest, and they spent it on education, and as a result,
and how did that happen? Why
because
did they?
The whole thing was underpinned by gold. I mean, the Industrial Revolution, of course, created enormous amounts of wealth, and the discovery of gold in California in 1849, and then in Australia, and then South Africa. A lot of that gold made its way back to Britain. We owned all the South African and the Australian stuff, and that helped fund everything.
So because gold never lost its worth.
It never loses its worth.
It never loses its worth.
No.
That's interesting to think about for a minute, isn't it? Because a bar of gold is worth a certain amount of money.
No, you're thinking about it the wrong way around.
Okay, go on, explain.
I just have explained. Yeah. You're using the pound or the dollar as your unit of account, because that's how we think. But the unit of account is losing its value all the time. The pound and the dollar are we're losing 7 to 10%. The pound has lost 40% of its purchasing power just since 2020.
Gosh.
That's how much less the pound buys you. And you can see it when you go to the supermarket, how much less house it buys you, how much less car. It's just a constant. And we've become normalised to it. That throughout history, that has only been in the case when civilizations fall apart.
Oh, good.
But if you go back to the Bible, so there's a story that King Nebuchadnezzar bought 300 loaves of bread with an ounce of gold. Well, an ounce of gold would buy you a lot more than 300 loaves of bread today, because we've got better at making bread. An ounce of gold was said to buy a Roman senator a toga and a pair of sandals. An ounce of gold, $3,000 to £2,500, something like that, would buy your local MP a very nice suit and shoes. Probably a Savile Row suit and shoes. So in terms of clothing, food, energy, gold buys you as much, if not more, than it's ever done.
Should we talk about the gold standard?
Yes, we can do.
Because this is why we're in this position, you argue?
Well, yeah, there was an article that came out in the Telegraph that said Dominic Frisby calls for a return to the gold standard, which I don't think I actually called for that.
Explain what the gold standard is, and then we'll progress.
The gold standard was, there are different gold standards, but the way we think about the gold standard is you would have a pound note, and you could walk in with your note or your dollar bill or whatever it is and exchange that dollar bill for a certain amount of gold. So the dollar or the pound or whichever currency it was effectively backed by gold. Now, in the 18th and 19th centuries, sovereigns, we were handling sovereigns on a daily basis. So gold was actually part of money. I'm holding up this is a silver dollar minted in 1880, and the dollar used to be, about 0.8 of an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce of silver. And that was a dollar was a day's wage for a working man. And you feel it, and it's, you know that silver has value because it's rare. You know that gold has value. But in the 20th century, the gold standards all fell apart. And the reason they all fell apart was America made it illegal to own gold. So even though foreigners could swap their dollars for gold, American citizens weren't actually handling gold. Similarly, the UK abandoned gold during World War I to print the money to pay for the war, and France and Germany did the same.
So basically broke the rules, wanted to print its own money, which meant then that gold became just an accessory, another.
Not quite, because even now, even though gold isn't official money, central banks still hold it.
Yeah.
But you're right about we broke the rules. If we'd stuck to the rules, World War I couldn't have happened to the same extent because there wasn't the gold to pay for it.
Right. Okay.
Which
means
what I mean?
That we may not have won World War I?
Well,
who knows?
Nobody would have won. I mean, did anyone win?
Everyone
really?
would have just run out of money instead, would they?
Exactly. And the war just would not have been given the oxygen to carry on. And it was breaking the rules that enabled it. And that's why governments don't like gold standards, because it limits what they're able to do. But we went back on the gold standard in 1925 and it came off again in 1932 after the Wall Street crash. But even though we went back on the gold standard, gold had been withdrawn from circulation, so citizens weren't actually holding gold, so it wasn't a proper gold standard. But as another government could take its pounds and exchange those with the Bank of England for gold, and that was the idea of it.
And it was Nixon who completely killed the gold
States
standard.
off, in 1971, and that was the last. That was the
which then steered the rest of the world effectively.
Yeah, and if you look at the cost of houses since 1970. Yes, because other currencies were tied to the US dollar, precisely. But if you look at the cost of houses, in the UK, houses have gone up something like 70 times since 1971. And ordinary people could afford houses in 1971. And now, especially in London, you've got to be exceptionally moneyed in order to afford a house. Salaries have gone up 20 times. So house prices have gone up 3.5 times more than salaries. So it now takes 2 salaries and a load more debt to buy a house. Cars have gone up 30, 40 times. Pints of beer 30 times.
And this wouldn't have happened if we were still on the gold standard.
Everything would have got cheaper because we got better at making stuff.
But why don't you advocate for it now? So why are you not a fully paid up member of the gold standard?
Because everything's gone digital. And so we don't use physical cash anymore. And the beauty of gold is that I can hand you this little gold coin, and it's what's called a bearer asset. So whoever has the gold coin has the wealth. So you're not relying on the Bank of England or an insurance company or a stock or any other third party. You've got the gold, you've got the wealth. So it's wealth in and of itself. It's nobody else's liability. All a gold standard is effectively is a payment system built on top of gold. So the payment becomes somebody else's liability, if you see what I mean. So it's just not really practical.
Okay. Should we add in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin into this equation as well?
Yeah.
Because you argue that this will become more an important factor, crypto and Bitcoin, than gold. There's no point in resurrecting the gold standard because we've already moved on from that. We've moved into different times. And as we said earlier, there are people who are incredibly suspicious about crypto and Bitcoin. Yeah. Why shouldn't we be?
Well, for anyone who's suspicious about Bitcoin, I would just say sign up with a Bitcoin exchange and buy £20 worth of Bitcoin and get a friend to do the same, and just start sending each other money and just learn about it. Just get used to using it and educate yourself. Everyone who's suspicious about Bitcoin, they're always like, I don't understand it. And you're like, well, have you tried it? And they're like, no. And you're, well, there you go. But the essential thing that is to understand about both Bitcoin and both gold is that they are both bearer assets. They are value in and of themselves. The essential difference between the two is gold is physical, it's an analog asset, and Bitcoin is digital. It's a digital asset. And so they both have similar functions in that they're both money that isn't printed by governments or issued by governments, but they have slightly different uses. And both are going to have a huge role to play in the future money systems of the world. If most people would, it's hard to disagree with the fact that, China is the most significant economy in the world, along with the United States, and it's growing and it has a huge global influence. If you look at Chinese gold, it's the largest gold producer in the world. It has been since it overtook South Africa in 2007. It's also the largest gold importer, and doesn't export a single ounce net. So
it's hanging on to its gold.
I'll say huge amounts of gold has made its way to China, and I write about it in the book, but the People's Bank of China has been understating its gold reserves by a factor of 4 or 5. In other words, it has 4 or 5 times as much gold as it says it does. It probably has more gold than the United States does. But, the Chinese motto is we must not shine too brightly. If it said we've got more gold than you, that would be a declaration of financial war. It would cause all sorts of upheaval in the financial markets. But it is accumulating vast amounts of gold. And this rate of accumulation accelerated in the months after America confiscated all Russian US dollar assets after it invaded Ukraine. All the countries along the Silk Road, suddenly this began a process of de-dollarization. In other words, they began accumulating gold. Now, the big problem that America has, this is going to take me about a minute or two to get through, but is that it has the reserve currency of the world. And by having the global reserve currency, it makes it inevitable that it will run a trade deficit with the rest of the world. And this is something that Trump wants to stop. He wants to get manufacturing back in the US, and partly for strategic reasons, partly to regenerate the Rust Belt. But in order to do that, they have to sacrifice a little bit of US dollar reserve status. And so they are quite happy in the short term for the neutral asset that is gold to have an increasing role as reserve currency. Vance actually called US dollar reserve currency a tax on American producers. And so the US dollar is slightly being sacrificed as a reserve currency, and gold will replace it, but maybe Bitcoin will replace it. Now, that suits China because they own lots of gold and they probably own lots of Bitcoin. It suits the US because they own lots of gold.
Trump has got his own Bitcoin, hasn't he?
That's a different coin. But the US government has about 200,000 Bitcoins, and US corporations have a lot of Bitcoin, and US citizens have a lot of Bitcoin. So there is a lot of Bitcoin one way or the other in the US. And it will you'll see this sort of almost like a competition between gold and Bitcoin. Now, actually, governments would probably prefer gold because they own lots of gold. They don't own as much Bitcoin. But in the years ahead, you're going to see this sort of conflict. And will it be, 10,000 years of monetary history, and gold has a pretty good record as being the reserve currency of the world? There's never been a global reserve currency that didn't start out backed by gold. Or will the digital practicality of Bitcoin be more important? We'll see. But for now, all roads lead to gold and Bitcoin.
Can we bring the UK into this
Sure.
by talking about what Gordon Brown did?
Yes.
He made a bit of a balls up, didn't he, on gold when he was Chancellor?
The most extraordinary balls up in the history. We have a long history of balls ups by our leaders, but that probably ranks top. He was under no pressure to sell. And he was advised by everyone, don't sell, but they wanted to rebalance the books or something. And they sold 2/3 of the British gold, and they never bought it back. That's the extraordinary thing.
Where did they sell it?
When did they sell it?
Why?
We don't know. They said it was they bought US treasuries and other assets in euros, and they wanted to reallocate the books. There's lots of theories. Some say they did it because he was bailing out Goldman Sachs. Others say he did it because they were trying to engineer an entry into the euro because it was a Tony Blair Gordon Brown thing. We'll never actually know. But in any case, we never bought that gold back, and it's believed by bullion dealers that China was on the other side of the trade. So China bought the UK's gold.
Okay.
And but what is so extraordinary now is that we have become, in this time where US treasuries, every other central bank that is offloading its US treasuries, the UK has become the second largest holder of US treasuries in the world. And Rachel Reeves is talking about selling our Bitcoin. Like, are you mad? All our Bitcoins are confiscated from drug dealers in the 10 years ago in the early part of Bitcoin's evolution, but the UK has been gifted with 60 or 70,000 Bitcoins. Now, Hungary sold its Bitcoins in 2017. If it had kept them, those Bitcoins would now be enough to pay off the entire national debt of Hungary.
Oh, gosh.
So if Rachel Reeves sells up, our Bitcoin's worth like 3 or 4, 5 billion. It would just be a tiny plaster on a huge wound. It'd be pointless. But she's been gifted this strategic asset, and she should keep it.
Well, okay, that is not a revenue raiser in autumn, then, in the autumn budget.
Which I guarantee it's coming, but it will rank, she'll be in the same way that Gordon Brown was the Chancellor who sold the Britain's gold. She'll be the Chancellor who sold Britain's Bitcoin.
Look, it's a fascinating book. I've not had a chance to ask half the questions I wanted to ask you. It's been a fascinating conversation. There's loads more in Dominic Frisby's brilliant book, The Secret History of Gold.